Now we'll take questions from the floor, and Farida Fozdar, you're first up. If you just indicate where you are. Farida, all right, there's a microphone coming your way, and if there's a particular panellist you'd like to direct your question to, just please nominate the panellist.
Just a general, it's not for anyone in particular. Around 1 in 5 Australians, or 20% of Australians, agree with the statement, "I feel more like a citizen of the world than of any particular country." This is from the Australian Survey of Social Attitudes data. Is this the new future for citizenship? If so, how will social cohesion and belonging be achieved when we have been encouraged for the last 400 years, since its inception, to see the nation state as the logical basis for cohesion?
Who'd like to start? Anne. All right. Anne's volunteered.
Thanks, Farida.
Thank you.
You know, the changing nature of international security and international relations means that, 20 years ago, international security was about state-on-state relationships. It was about maintaining a status quo between states to ensure international security. That's changed. The international security landscape now is about state and non-state actors. More and more increasingly, threats to international security, threats to stability, threats to governance, threats to human stability and human security come from non-state actors. And so we then start to ask the question, can I still be Australian? Can I still be an Australian citizen, but have support for not another nation, but for a non-state actor or a non-state group, like Greenpeace, or ISIS, or the Al-Nusra Front? Okay? So the question of allegiance to a nation state is starting to become of greater significance in the world, as we have non-nation states being more significant players in the international field. And I just did a media interview about a young man who's gone overseas. He's in Syria, he's working for an aid organisation, and he's broken the Australian law, because working for an aid organisation over there, he is actually aligning himself to a rebel group or a terrorist organisation. This young man very strongly exhibits some ideas of global citizenship. He's over there because he wants to help the people of Syria. But should we consider him no longer worthy of Australian citizenship? Should he be a candidate for stripping his Australian citizenship?
Hass, you detected some interest there?
Well, no, I just think, I think the idea of common good does not really stop at our borders. No. And I think these same opportunities can connect and foster understanding right across the globe and in people across different countries. I mean, being a loyal Australian and a global citizen, I don't think are really opposites. I think you can actually work both of them, but we need to be mature enough to understand that. And in fact, developing deeper ties to the rest of the world may actually go a long way to help a way of ensuring our nation's future security and prosperity at the same time. But we need to understand that, because that is the way of the world.
We gave people a whole range of options. Citizen of Australia, of the world, of my local community, of my religion, the country I was born in. And what we found is that people didn't see it as an either-or question. No. They're mutually compatible. That's right. For many people. Yeah. So you can identify with your religion, you can identify with Australia, you can identify with the world, and a whole range of things simultaneously.
I mean, what we need to be careful of, and following on from Andrew's point and with Anne, why is there this complexity in the sense of belonging, where there's a group of our communities, the sense is growing, but really it's at the expense of a particular community. And I'm not just saying the Muslim community, anyone that could be out of favour, there's this tendency where they will be on the side, and then the rest of the community actually grows a sense of belonging or unity at the expense of that particular community, because they are deemed to be a problem or an issue.
A related question from Colin Archibald. Where were you, Colin? Colin, towards the back, yeah. Microphone for Colin. A related question. Thank you.
Good evening, panel. I've got a couple of shortish questions.
The one on dual citizenship, Colin.
Okay. The first one is, if I've got dual citizenship, does that make me 50% committed to Australia?
How do you feel?
Okay. Thanks, Colin. We'll just get a view from the panel. Yep. Dual citizenship. What's the story? Is it different from just citizenship of Australia? Andrew?
I've got dual citizenship too. And when I was 18, I thought, I'm going to go back to the country where I was born. I'm going to see if I belong there. And I went back there and I didn't belong there either.
That's right.
And so I came back here with a sense of what it really meant to be an Australian from Egypt. So I think that's, to me, what dual citizenship means to me. People ask me, where are you from? I say, I'm from Egypt. But what are you? I'm Australian. And I don't see any conflict between the two. I am an Australian, and I was born in Egypt, and this is Australia. Australia is a nation of people who were born elsewhere, whose parents were born elsewhere, or who came from elsewhere, except for our Aboriginal and Indigenous people. So, I think dual citizenship has asked you, how do you feel? I think it's something that can be a real value to you as to each individual, because it allows you that space to navigate an identity which takes positives from both of those, sometimes competing, in some spaces competing, but both of those aspects of who you are as a person.
Hang on, Hass. Anne, can I just follow up one question? You said you went to Egypt and realised you didn't fit in there either. You've come back here. Is your position still the same locally within Perth, within Western Australia, about fitting in?
No, I really, going back to Egypt really changed me, because I thought, oh, that's where I'll find my belonging. And then I went there and I was too Aussie for Egypt. They didn't know how to handle me. So yeah, it really changed it really affected my future and how I saw myself and where I placed myself as an Aussie and what it meant to be Australian for me.
I wonder how often that happens. But that's thanks, Anne. That's very interesting. Hass, sorry.
Look, I think, dual citizenship in the formal sense, but we could ask, half our population about young people who have dual cultures, who straddle dual cultures, will feel exactly the same way. But I think there is a unifying factor around that. And, similarly with Anne, I don't have dual citizenship. I was born here, but my parents have Turkish descent, but I spent some of my childhood in Turkey. Now, I wasn't accepted there either, because in Turkey, of all places, because I was an Australian, and all they remember was Gallipoli, so I was the enemy at that time. At 13, 14 years old in the 1960s, that's how you were seen. So you come back to Australia and you say, oh, I'm at home, and what they say then, oh, he's a Turk, you're the enemy. So, so you have to somehow, work your way around that, whether it's a formal dual citizenship or just being someone that's born here that is proud of also having this second culture.
Sammy, what are your thoughts?
Can
Anthea.
I just comment that it is actually about a frame of reference, and having dual citizenship actually just makes you feel more. Oh, no, I don't have dual citizenship, so I can't actually speak. But I orient this to the global war on talent, and in actual fact, people that can see themselves as people that can move around the world, that feel like they've got opportunities around the world, are actually very highly sought after. And we have to be very aware of the fact that people have dual or multiple nationalities are people that will see themselves as having opportunities beyond Australia's borders. And we run a huge risk of actually losing the talent that is being developed here in Australia to companies that are just looking everywhere for the next generation of talent for their organisations. And for us, most of the strength of the people that we want to invest in and that need to invest in Australia for us to continue to be strong are actually families and children of migrants. And that's where the young people are. And so we need to appreciate and acknowledge that dual citizenship is a great thing.
Thanks, Anthea. And now, Colin, you want another brief question?
Yeah, just based on my background, I mean, my father went from Jamaica to England on a boat, and I've come from England to Australia on a plane. And I think it's how you arrive somewhere. I spent 30 odd years in England kind of fighting this whole, where am I from? I wasn't accepted there. And I think Australia's in a great position now to actually learn from the mistakes that happened in England, as in how people are treated. It's the people on the floor, really, as in the community, that affect how someone feels. And I think from an educational point of view, it's important that people are educated and you know, told, asked questions, and you know, and accept and change.
I agree with that, and I think you know, one of the interesting things is that we in Australia have built a very solid foundation in respecting and appreciating diversity through our multicultural agenda. I mean, a lot of other European countries say that multiculturalism has failed for them simply on the basis because they're ethnically diverse. Having a successful multicultural country does not mean simply because you're ethnically diverse community that you're going to have a successful country that coexists without putting a lot of hard work and hard yakka into it. And I think, you know, this country in the last 40 years has done that. And yes, we still have a long way to go, and simply because democracy or diversity is an evolving factor, and with globalization it gets even more demanding. But we do have that solid foundation, and simply being able to sit down and have these discussions, have these discussion papers, shows that we're not being complacent, and I think that's one of the greatest values that we have learnt in this country.
We'll have questions from the floor in a minute, but Sammy, is that your experience too? Is that do you agree with the point that Has just made?
For me, like, okay, based on Australia's multiculturalism, diversity, it's a thing of wonder. It is. I mean, I've been to Europe and the other places. Like Angela Merkel recently said that Germany, multiculturalism has failed Germany, or something ludicrous like that. In Australia, there have been, when I go to Perth now, versus even 3 years ago, for example. 3 years ago, I did the first Perth Fringe Festival, and I was probably the only non-white performer in the festival. And since then to now, the upcoming one, it's a huge multicultural affair. You go to Melbourne and Sydney, you have the same kind of experience where you can walk around for hours and hear different accents and different voices coming at you from all directions. It's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing to be celebrated. So in that regard, I think Australia deserves a great deal of credit in having done things right in such a short amount of time. I mean, compared to a lot of European countries, Australia had its borders closed to people outside. You know, the White Australia policy, for example, was in effect far longer than anything similar in any other country. Yet in such a short amount of time, Australia's come very far with multiculturalism and with different ethnicities, not just living here, but actually blending in and identifying as Australian. I think even 66% is a great number. It's an excellent number, and like you said, that's actually, there's so many gradations within that that we don't know what the actual number tends to be. When you link that to citizenship, for example, though, I'm a Pakistani citizen with a big C and a small c. I'm an Australian citizen currently with a small c because I haven't earned the big C yet. I have another, I think, 8-10 months left from that. The Pakistani citizenship for me is something I will always have as a nationality thing, as an identity thing. But the legal citizenship actually can sometimes be a bit of a burden in that I can't travel to most of the world without a visa, and to get that visa I have to send my passport for 3 to 4 months. It gets rejected repeatedly. I was supposed to come to Australia in 2006 to do a comedy festival here, and I got rejected because I was from Pakistan at the time. Once I get an Australian citizenship, that burden is lifted. I actually can travel to most of the world. It's one of the most useful passports in the world in that regard. It also offers me a great deal of privilege within Australia, within Australian society, a great deal of access to different resources. Australian embassies around the world are now open to me, which are far more effective than Pakistani embassies around the world. But at the same time, it's one of those things where which one am I grateful for? I'm grateful for the identity that one gives me, and I'm grateful for the privilege that one gives me, but I'm also hoping that I become grateful, and I no doubt will, for the identity that one is also giving me.
We've got time for a couple of questions from the floor. You'd be amazed how quickly time is flying, but would you please, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, and the microphone will come your way. Yes, lady right at the back there. Lady, yeah, can you see that? And if you just please say who you are, if you don't mind doing that, out of courtesy to the panel and everyone. And if you want to direct it to a particular panellist, that's fine, and if you can keep it brief.
Good evening. My name's Wendy Wisniewski. I'm from the Baha'i community of Perth. I'm a New Zealand Australian. I really thank you for the discussion that we're having this evening. It's so important. And I wanted to ask the panel, when I'm overseas, I tend not to say I'm Australian because I'm really embarrassed about the way we are treating people who are seeking to make a new life in Australia. And I look at the example in New Zealand, and in fact my own family were refugees from Poland during the Second World War, and they were given a home in New Zealand, they were given safety, they were given opportunity and education, which is what we all want. I just wanted to acknowledge what Dr. Michael said. What you were talking about, I think, is actually virtues, not values. The virtues of compassion, kindness, tolerance. And I think this is what we need to instill in our children at the most basic community level. But I want to ask the panel, how is it that we sing a national anthem at our citizenship ceremonies that says, for those who come across the seas with boundless gifts to share, and then we've got this line, and I think we need to look at it, because what we're doing is locking you up in detention camps, miles from anywhere. And it's just ironic that we sing this at our citizenship ceremonies, we sing this at all our events that mark important occasions, the school assemblies, the opportunities.
Yep,
so
got the drift.
What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much.
Can I just quickly
Yes.
put a statistic there? Do you know how many refugees are resettled in New Zealand each year? Well, the number is actually close to 1,000. Australia resettles 13,750 a year. Pro rata, Australia is punching well above the weight of New Zealand, and in fact, in an international context, is also close to being number one in terms of resettlement. So my point here is that it's a very complex issue, and as many issues are complex, it can't be reduced, I think, to simple emotional outpourings, because New Zealand is actually doing very badly in terms of resettlement.
So, Andrew, you're suggesting perhaps that the message isn't, you're saying there are good things happening, but the message isn't getting through?
It's not, because we want to assume that there's a solution to problems, and often there is no simple solution to problems, but yet much of our debate is in terms of simple solutions.
Yeah. But as the point you make, it's still it's an ongoing, it's a big issue. We know it's a big issue. There's no doubt about that.
Andrew and I can argue about
Sammy?
Australia's treatments of refugees for hours, because I vehemently disagree with, I think, literally everything he's just said. But the one thing I would like to point out to you is, I'm from Pakistan, right? And Pakistanis, when you travel abroad, there's a whole lot of burden that we carry with us, and a lot of guilt and shame sometimes, because they're like, what did you do to Malala? What did you do to so-and-so? And we have a lot of questions to answer for. And I meet Australians sometimes when they go abroad. People are like, what are you doing to refugees and stuff? Americans, when they travel abroad, get embarrassed. Britishers, when they travel abroad, get embarrassed for a variety of reasons. I think the only people in the world right now who, when they travel abroad, don't have something to ask for is Greenland. And that's, I don't know what they're up to, and we should look into that. But every country comes with a certain amount of guilt, and because that's something I had to wonder about. Like, am I comfortable with the way Australia's behaving in certain areas? And look, it's terrible and it's awful. It's better than what Pakistan does in certain areas. It's worse than what other countries do in certain areas. Every country has its good and bad. And like you said, like New Zealand has stuff that they probably shouldn't be proud of either. So when you go abroad, how you carry yourself and what you identify yourself with, I think ends up being less about what other people perceive you as, and more as what you yourself carry with you. And that's something to be always aware of when you are, identifying with a certain country.
Thanks, Amy. Another question from the floor. Lady at the front here. Lady, the microphone coming your way, yes. Thank you.
I'm Iran Hanyadi, and I am a dual citizen, and I am a result of I was a refugee. I haven't actually got a question. I just would like to see that we promote more that we are humans. And I agree with Colin Michael, what you're saying. Those values are so important, to respect each other and treat each other as humans. I nursed for 30 years. I have never seen anybody with blue blood. Everybody has red blood, and I think that's what everybody who is in power should be promoting, that we are all humans and we all bleed red.
Thank you very much. That definitely is a comment. This lady in the middle, Ken, all right. Ken Michael has a comment to make, and then the lady there in the middle.
I just want to endorse what was just said. You know, we all are humans. We all deserve respect. We all deserve compassion. And we should be trying to unite ourselves as a community through the proper behaviour of those activities and be there to support. So when people do come to our shores, I'm not going to buy into whether it's right or wrong, but what I will say is they need to be treated as human beings with compassion and caring. And if we treat all of ourselves, each of ourselves, like that, then we've got a greater opportunity to have a sense of belonging and work towards social cohesion, which is what it's about.
Thank you. This might be the last question this evening. Yes.
Lucky last. Good evening, everyone. My name is Loretta Baldessar from the School of Social Sciences at UWA. And my question is, to what extent do you think the government's current emphasis on the duties and obligations of citizenship rather than the rights and opportunities actually diminishes Australia's social cohesion?
Anne's got a hand up.
Look, I think that the political rhetoric at the moment is very much about rights and, the responsibilities and the duties, as you say. I'm not fully convinced that that has a direct an impact as we would like to think on social cohesion, because I think social cohesion is a much more complex, there's a much more complex picture to it. I think that, improving social cohesion in Australia, we need to really strengthen our civil society in order to be able to do that. And we need to really strengthen our civil society structures. And you know what, Sammy, I was in Pakistan last year and I was doing a tour of Pakistan for the Australian government. And I was actually really quite impressed by the strength of Pakistan's civil society organisations and the quality of those civil society organisations as well. So I think that yes, it is damaging, and it's a difficult environment to operate in at the moment if you work with communities, and if you particularly work in an area that I work in, because it is a highly politicised area, which tends to then take away a lot of the efforts and the energy in putting it from actually doing the work and actually making progress and actually being effective to being about the rhetoric and the perceptions and how things are framed and things like that. But I think that, it is not it is a difficult situation, but it is not a direct influence on social cohesion. I think there are other factors that we need to look at about social cohesion. This is one part of the puzzle, but it's a very it's the veneer of the puzzle, but it is not the puzzle, if that makes sense.
Has.
I'd just like to reverse it a little bit. I think probably if you're creating more opportunities for a community or communities to connect with one another, through social engagement or participation or volunteering or any of those things, what you're actually doing is you're fostering increased participation in that community. And I think as that develops, you are then developing a greater sense of loyalty and trust. So it's reversing it, and I think you're right. I think it's important to reverse that opportunities and the notion of rights and opportunities in order to develop that loyalty and trust, because people feel that they do have that sense of belonging in the sense that they're able to participate. I mean, it's the whole notion of breaking down bridges. There's the fear of the unknown, and I think by insisting on people to have duties and obligations where they've not actually been able to participate and capitalise on the opportunities of what a community offers, then it becomes very difficult. So I would really reverse that.
Brief comments from other panellists?
There's a study I was reading about social cohesion recently. I can't remember the name for the life of me, but the basic summary of the study was that after 150 people within a community, social cohesion starts breaking down in terms of empathy, sympathy, and personal one-to-one interaction. you're not going to have everyone in Australia holding hands and singing songs together. That's never going to happen in any country in the whole world. But at the same time, does everyone identify as Australian? Are they, do they understand, even though they may disagree on 90% of what it means, what Australian values the term means? Some might say mateship, some might say fair go, some might say something else. Is there a general assumption that those involve a betterness of yourself and or the country and a better representation of the country? Those are things that I think inspire social cohesion more than any legal issues or any governmental issues, for example. Governmental issues will always be temporary. The next government come along, they'll have a different rhetoric. The next government come along, they'll have a different rhetoric. Australia will still stand, and more importantly, the communities in Australia will interact in different and unique ways constantly, some separating from each other, some coming together. But that's something that, it has to happen naturally and over time.
You must come from a pretty stable family of 150 with social cohesion. I've seen social cohesion break down with 5. It's pretty hard to get everyone moving in the same direction, but thank you, Sammy, thank you very much.
In terms of actions of politicians and the way that they contribute or don't contribute to politicians, the way that they frame debates, obviously that's a factor. Another factor in terms of the actions of politicians is, do they inspire respect in the community? I think that there's a major deficit in that area, like the parliamentary entitlements affair and so on, and the cynicism that actually breeds in the community. I think that's another factor that's to be factored into the way that our society is working at the present time.
Ken Michael.
Well, thank you. For social cohesion, we need to just go beyond isolated issues and focus on them. The reality is that if we want to bring people together, then you have to have these sense of values that bind them. You need to go beyond the situation of just expecting a particular situation, be it political or otherwise, which will perhaps cloud the issue for the moment, not necessarily permanently, but what will be permanent are those virtues or values, as whatever you wish to call them, of compassion, respect, integrity, and mutual respect in particular, and recognising that we are part of families and that families do unite, and bringing people together can mean that we can work much better as a nation in a much more caring attitude, but we will always find isolated incidents that could drag this down in any way, and we should not let that get in the way, and we should go beyond that and create a situation which we can all live with together in harmony. And while others may argue that's a difficult thing to do, I believe we're doing pretty well at the moment.
And we had a political leader about 30 years ago who promoted consensus. Every second sentence had the word consensus in it, and it was remarkably successful while he was doing well. So that sort of pursuing that goal of unity, obviously, and the country responded. Well, look, on that note, and that's a good question on which to bow out on, we're now officially out of time, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. And so we've got to bring our panel session to a close. And while that means the end of our sort of formal discussion here at the Government House Ballroom, the conversation will no doubt and hopefully continue online, and you're invited to join the conversation via Twitter, and that hashtag again is #OzCitizen. So I'd ask you to join me in thanking our panellists again, Dr. Ken Michael, Sammy Shah, Anthea Hancox from the Scanlon Foundation, of course, Dr. Hasta Lal, and Professor Andrew Marcus, and Dr. Anne Alley. Thank you very much for joining us.